January 28, 1846. Punjab, India. General Sir Harry Smith faced a problem. 20,000 Sikh warriors, the Khalsa, the finest army in India, stood between him and victory. They were disciplined, well-armed, trained by French officers, and they'd already pushed British forces to the edge of defeat twice in the past month. This wasn't going to be easy, but what happened next became known as the perfect battle. Every element of British military power, infantry, cavalry, artillery, worked in flawless coordination. Every phase of the battle executed without error. Every tactical decision proved correct. When it ended, the Khalsa army was destroyed. British casualties were minimal, and the Duke of Wellington, when he studied the battle, called it tactical perfection. This is the story of the Battle of Aliwal, the day when British combined arms warfare reached its peak. The victory that proved even the finest Indian army couldn't match British tactical excellence. And the battle that military academies still study as the textbook example of how warfare should be conducted. Welcome to Britain's history. Today we're covering the battle Wellington praised as perfect, the day when every element of British military power worked together flawlessly to defeat the most formidable opponent Britain faced in India. But before we get to that flawless execution, before we watch British forces demonstrate tactical perfection, we need to understand who the Sikhs were and why they presented such a dangerous challenge. And if you're enjoying this, subscribe. We cover the battles where British forces proved their excellence, the victories won through superior tactics, discipline and coordination. The Sikh Empire in the early 1840s was unlike any other power in India. Founded by Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the Lion of Punjab, it had transformed from a collection of warrior bands into a modern military state that commanded respect even from the British. Ranjit Singh was a political and military genius who understood the changing nature of warfare in India. He recognised that to survive against the expanding British East India Company, his army couldn't rely on feudal levies or traditional cavalry charges. He needed a European-style military force capable of facing British regulars on equal terms. So Ranjit Singh did something revolutionary. He hired European officers to modernise his army completely. French officers like Generals Allard, Ventura and Court, veterans of Napoleon's Grande Armée, came to Punjab and brought with them decades of military experience from Europe's battlefields. Italian artillery experts taught Sikh gunners the latest techniques in gunnery. The Maharaja purchased modern weapons from European manufacturers and established arsenals to produce copies. He organised his forces into regular battalions with European-style ranks, uniforms and drill. The result was the Khalsa, the army of the pure. The name itself reflected the martial and religious brotherhood that bound these soldiers together. This wasn't a feudal levy or an irregular force that would scatter under pressure. The Khalsa were professional soldiers, many serving for decades, organised in Gurchuras, regular infantry battalions that fought in line formation, exactly like European armies. They had excellent cavalry trained for shock action rather than traditional skirmishing. Their artillery was handled by skilled crews who'd learned scientific gunnery from French experts and could match British gun crews shot for shot. And unlike other Indian forces the British had faced, armies that often broke and fled when faced with disciplined European infantry, the Khalsa stood and fought pitched battles using European tactics. They understood volley fire, they maintained formation under fire, and they knew how to manoeuvre as formed units on the battlefield. When Ranjit Singh died in 1839, his empire descended into political chaos, but the Khalsa remained powerful and disciplined. In fact, they became more powerful. The Sikh military became a state within a state, increasingly difficult for civilian authorities to control. By 1845, tensions with British India had reached breaking point. The Khalsa wanted war. They believed they could defeat the British, and they very nearly did. The First Sikh War began in December 1845, with two brutal battles that showed the British what they were up against. At Mudki, British forces won but took heavy casualties fighting the Khalsa. At Ferozeshah, a desperate two-day battle, British forces came within moments of complete defeat. The Sikh artillery tore through British ranks. Their infantry held formation under fire. Their cavalry charged with determination. Only desperate fighting and a bit of luck saved the British from disaster. These battles shocked British India. The Sikhs weren't like other Indian opponents. They didn't break under artillery fire. They didn't flee when cavalry charged. They fought like European armies, standing in formation, returning volley fire, counter-attacking aggressively. British commanders realised they faced an opponent who matched them in discipline and exceeded them in numbers. By late January 1846, General Sir Harry Smith commanded a division ordered to clear Sikh forces from British territory near the Sutlej River. Smith was 58 years old and one of the British Army's most experienced officers. He'd enlisted as a teenager and fought through the entire Peninsular War under Wellington, participating in dozens of battles and sieges. At the siege of Badajoz in 1812, amid the chaos of the city's storming, he'd found a terrified Spanish girl hiding in the ruins, Juana Maria de los Dolores de León. He married her the next day and she'd followed him through the rest of the war and beyond. Their love story was famous throughout the British Army. Juana travelled with Harry on campaign, sharing the hardships and dangers of military life. She was with him at Waterloo, in South Africa, and now in India. Smith was known for his energy, his aggressive tactics, and his absolute confidence in British military methods. He'd learned warfare from Wellington himself, the importance of choosing good defensive positions, the value of disciplined infantry firepower, the necessity of combined arms coordination. He understood that British success came not from individual heroics, but from professional execution of proven tactical doctrine. When he encountered a Sikh force of about 20,000 men near the village of Aliwal on January 28th, he didn't hesitate. Despite being outnumbered 2-1, he decided to attack immediately with his 10,000 troops. He believed British tactical superiority and professional execution could overcome numerical disadvantage. Aliwal would prove him absolutely correct. On paper, the odds looked poor. The Sikhs outnumbered Smith 2-1. They held a strong defensive position. Their artillery was excellent, but Smith saw weaknesses in their deployment. The Sikhs had positioned their army with the Sutlej River directly behind them, a tactical error that would prove fatal. If their line broke, they'd have nowhere to retreat. Smith decided to demonstrate British tactical superiority through perfect execution of combined arms warfare. The morning of January 28th began with British forces deploying in textbook fashion. Smith arranged his infantry in the centre, redcoats in line formation, 2 ranks deep, standing at attention with their muskets. His artillery deployed in front of the infantry line, ready to begin the battle with bombardment. His cavalry formed on both flanks, British dragoons on the right, Indian cavalry on the left. This was the classic British formation, the same basic deployment used from Blenheim to Waterloo. Nothing innovative about it, just proven tactics executed with precision. The Sikh army matched the British deployment. Their infantry stood in regular battalions, their artillery positioned to sweep the British approach, their cavalry on the flanks ready to charge. They'd learned European warfare well. The French officers who'd trained them had done excellent work. This would be a proper pitched battle between two armies fighting in similar styles. The difference would come down to execution. Smith ordered his artillery to open fire. British guns began pounding the Sikh positions. The Sikh artillery immediately returned fire. The artillery duel, a necessary prelude to any 19th century battle, thundered across the Punjab plain. Cannonballs flew back and forth. Crews worked their guns with professional speed. The Sikhs matched the British gun for gun. Their French-trained artillerists knew their business, but British crews were simply better. Years of practice, superior gun design, and excellent command gave British artillery a slight but crucial edge. After softening the Sikh positions with artillery fire, Smith ordered the infantry advance. The redcoats stepped forward in perfect alignment. Officers walked alongside their men. Sergeants maintained the spacing. Colours, the battalion flags, stayed upright, marking each unit's position. The line moved forward steadily across the open ground toward the Sikh positions. This was what British infantry did best, the disciplined advance under fire, maintaining formation despite casualties, closing the distance to musket range. The Sikhs opened fire with their own muskets. British soldiers fell. But the line kept moving, gaps closing automatically as trained soldiers stepped inward to maintain formation integrity. British soldiers had drilled this movement hundreds of times. Under fire, with comrades falling around them, they executed the drill mechanically. The advance continued. When they reached effective musket range, about 100 yards, British officers gave the command to halt and prepare to fire. The British volley crashed out. Thousands of muskets firing in coordinated volleys, the sound like continuous thunder. Reload, fire again, reload, fire. The British system of volley fire, perfected over a century of warfare, delivered devastating firepower. Sikh soldiers fell in rows. Their return fire was brave but less effective. British training produced a higher rate of accurate fire. The firefight continued, both sides standing in line exchanging volleys at close range. This was the brutal simplicity of 19th century warfare. Two lines of men shooting at each other until one side broke. But Aliwal wasn't decided by the infantry firefight alone. This is where Smith's genius and British tactical superiority came into play. While the infantry kept the Sikh centre engaged, Smith unleashed his cavalry on both flanks in perfectly timed charges. British cavalry on the right swept around the Sikh left flank. Indian cavalry on the British left charged the Sikh right flank. The timing was flawless. The cavalry hit just as the Sikh infantry was fully engaged with the British centre and couldn't manoeuvre to meet the flank attacks. The Sikh cavalry tried to counter the British charges, but they were outmatched. British cavalry training emphasised shock action and disciplined charges. The British dragoons hit the Sikh flank like a hammer, sabres cutting through resistance, horses trampling defenders. On the other flank, the Indian cavalry under British command performed equally well. The Sikh flanks collapsed. Their infantry battalions, now attacked from front and sides, began to waver. Smith saw the moment. The Sikh line was breaking. He ordered a general advance. British infantry surged forward with bayonets fixed. Artillery crews abandoned their guns to follow the advance, ready to bring their pieces forward as soon as the enemy line broke completely. Cavalry pressed their advantages on the flanks. Every element of Smith's army moved forward in coordinated assault. This was combined arms warfare at its finest. Infantry, cavalry, and artillery all working together in perfect synchronization. The Sikh centre broke. Soldiers who'd fought with tremendous courage realised their position was untenable. With British infantry charging from the front, cavalry sweeping the flanks, and artillery preparing to enfilade their positions, the Khalsa warriors began to retreat. This wasn't a panicked rout, not yet. The Sikhs fell back in relatively good order, trying to preserve their formations. But they were retreating toward the Sutlej River, and that's where Smith's tactical perfection turned into complete victory. As the Sikhs reached the river, they discovered the consequences of their positioning error. The Sutlej was deep and fast-flowing. The ferries and fords were few and quickly became choked with retreating soldiers. Men who'd fought with discipline and courage now found themselves trapped against an uncrossable water barrier, with British cavalry pursuing relentlessly. The organised retreat dissolved into chaos. British cavalry pursued to the river's edge, cutting down fleeing soldiers. Some Sikhs tried to swim across and drowned in their armour. Others stood and fought to the death rather than surrender. The Khalsa's reputation for fierce courage was fully justified. These warriors died fighting, but tactical errors and British superiority had made their bravery futile. By the end of the day, the Sikh army was destroyed. Bodies littered the battlefield and lined the riverbank. Captured artillery, abandoned equipment, and thousands of casualties marked the completeness of British victory. Smith's casualties were remarkably light, fewer than 600 killed and wounded from a force of 10,000. For a decisive victory in a major battle, these losses were minimal. The Sikhs lost 3,000 to 5,000 casualties, and their entire army as a fighting force. This disproportion, achieving complete victory with minimal friendly casualties, was the ultimate mark of tactical perfection. When news of Aliwal reached Britain, military authorities studied Smith's battle report with great interest. The Duke of Wellington, Britain's greatest living soldier, examined the details carefully. Wellington recognised something special in this battle. Every phase had been executed correctly. The deployment was textbook. The artillery preparation was effective. The infantry advance was coordinated. The cavalry charges were perfectly timed. The pursuit was relentless, but controlled. There were no mistakes, no moments of confusion, no missed opportunities. Wellington reportedly called Aliwal a perfect example of how combined arms warfare should be conducted. This wasn't hyperbole or exaggeration. Wellington understood military excellence. He'd spent decades studying warfare and commanding armies. When he praised Aliwal as tactically perfect, he meant it literally. Smith had executed British tactical doctrine flawlessly. Every element that made British forces superior, disciplined infantry, effective artillery, shock cavalry, combined arms coordination, professional command, had been demonstrated at Aliwal. The battle became a teaching example at military academies, a model of how to fight and win with minimal friendly casualties. The victory at Aliwal had immediate strategic consequences. British confidence, shaken by the desperate battles at Mudki and Ferozeshah, was restored. Smith had proved the Khalsa could be beaten decisively. The First Sikh War continued for another month. The massive Battle of Sobraon in February 1846 would end the war decisively, but Aliwal provided the psychological boost British forces needed. It demonstrated that British tactical superiority could overcome Sikh numbers and courage. For the Sikhs, Aliwal was a devastating blow. They'd fought with tremendous bravery. Their courage was never in question. British commanders consistently praised Sikh warriors for their discipline and determination. But courage alone couldn't overcome tactical inferiority and poor positioning. The Khalsa had learned European warfare well, but the British had perfected it through a century of global conflict. That experience and refinement made the critical difference. Interestingly, British defeat of the Sikhs led to deep mutual respect. Unlike many other Indian opponents, the Sikhs had fought using European methods and shown remarkable courage doing so. British soldiers and officers came to regard the Sikhs as equals in martial spirit. After the Sikh Empire's annexation, the British recruited heavily from Sikh communities. Sikh regiments became among the most valued units in the British Indian Army. The fierce warriors who'd fought so hard against the British at Aliwal and Sobraon became loyal soldiers fighting alongside the British in conflicts worldwide. This transformation from enemies to allies speaks to British recognition of Sikh military quality. The British weren't simply imposing rule, they were incorporating proven warriors into their military system. Sikh soldiers would serve with distinction in the Indian Mutiny of 1857, remaining loyal to the British when much of the Bengal army rebelled. They'd fight in both world wars with courage that validated their martial reputation. The respect that began at battles like Aliwal endured for generations. The Battle of Aliwal stands as perhaps the finest example of British tactical excellence in India. It wasn't the largest battle of the Sikh Wars. Sobraon was bigger. It wasn't the most desperate. Ferozeshah nearly ended in British defeat, but it was the most perfectly executed. Every element worked as intended. Every phase proceeded according to plan. The result was complete victory, achieved with minimal casualties, the goal of every military operation. Wellington's praise elevated Aliwal to legendary status. When Britain's greatest general calls a battle perfect, military professionals pay attention. Aliwal became required study for officers. Its lessons, proper deployment, combined arms coordination, timing of attacks, relentless but controlled pursuit, were analysed and taught. The battle demonstrated that British tactical doctrine, when executed by well-trained professional forces, produced decisive results even against first-rate opponents. For British pride, Aliwal represents excellence through discipline and training. This wasn't a victory won by numerical superiority or technological advantage. Smith was outnumbered 2-1. The Sikh artillery was excellent. Their infantry was well trained. Their courage was unquestionable. British victory came from superior execution of tactical fundamentals, better coordination, more effective fire discipline, perfect timing of combined arms, professional command decisions. These were the hallmarks of British military excellence, refined through decades of global warfare. The battle also demonstrated British ability to adapt and excel in Indian conditions. This wasn't European warfare transplanted unchanged to India. Smith's force included Indian cavalry performing crucial roles. British success in India required incorporating Indian soldiers into European tactical systems. At Aliwal, Indian cavalry under British command helped win the flanking attacks that decided the battle. This demonstrated the British talent for creating effective combined forces from diverse elements. If this is the kind of military history that interests you, battles won through tactical excellence, victories that demonstrated British professional superiority, moments when discipline and coordination proved decisive, then you know what to do. These are the stories that deserve to be remembered. These are the examples of military perfection that still teach valuable lessons. Thank you for watching Britain's history. The battles that proved British excellence, told the way they deserve to be told.